They said the West was a land of boundless opportunity, a new life, a fresh start, a place where dreams could unfurl beneath an endless sky, where fortunes lay waiting to be claimed by the brave and the bold. But they didn't tell you, not in those grand, sweeping tales, how much it could steal, how swiftly the most brilliant dreams could crumble into dust, scattered by an unforgiving wind, or what it could leave behind, etched not just into the parched soil of the unforgiving land, but into the very contours of a woman's heart, a heart that learned, through bitter experience, the true meaning of waiting, for a promise that, in the end, never truly arrived. 20 years earlier, in a world far removed from this stark, sun-baked horizon, a world of green hills and bustling towns, a young woman named Adelia prepared for the journey of a lifetime. Her heart swelled with an unburdened hope, a fragile vessel brimming with expectations. This hope was meticulously nourished by promises carefully penned in letters, sent from a man who now stood thousands of miles across a continent. From William. He was to be her husband, her anchor in a new, unknown world. His words painted a vivid, irresistible picture of a new beginning, vast and limitless as the western sky, as bright and unwavering as the love he professed. Adelia, with the innocence of untried youth and the absolute certainty of a pure heart, believed him. Every single word, every single promise. She would often sit, tracing the elegant loops of his handwriting, her imagination painting the ranch, the life, the love that awaited them. She cherished those letters, a tangible link to her future, a map to her happiness. She carried her dreams not merely in her hopeful spirit, but also in a small, exquisitely embroidered pouch, a tiny treasure filled with dried wildflowers from her childhood home. Her radiant smile truly reached her clear blue eyes that sparkled with the light of her unclouded future. The resounding whistle of the colossal train, rather than a somber farewell, felt like a joyous summons to a destiny that glittered, in her mind, like untapped gold, waiting just for her. Days bled into nights, and then into more days, each blurring into the next, marked only by the shifting light outside her window. The relentless rhythm of the train became a hypnotic lullaby, carrying Adelia, mile by mile, closer to her perceived destiny. Each passing mile was not merely a measure of physical distance, but a subtle, yet profound, deepening of her anticipation. And with that anticipation, a sharpened awareness began to emerge, a quiet, almost imperceptible apprehension of the immense distance she was truly covering. The world outside, once a familiar tapestry of vibrant green fields and gentle, shadowed forests, transformed before her very eyes. It blurred, then opened into vast, open plains that stretched further than the eye could see, beneath skies that felt impossibly grand, dwarfing the very train itself. Beautiful, yes, breathtaking in its wild, untamed majesty. But as the last familiar signs of civilization vanished, replaced by increasingly rugged and desolate stretches of land, parched earth, stark rock formations, and distant, forbidding mesas, a quiet, insistent unease began to settle deep within Alara's heart. It was undeniably daunting. A raw, powerful wilderness that whispered of both freedom and peril in equal measure. The sense of isolation grew with every revolution of the wheels, each click-clack against the rails a countdown to a world she knew only from letters. Still, in those moments of burgeoning doubt, William's words, his steadfast, unwavering promises, those carefully chosen sentences from his letters, they were her unwavering anchors in this dizzying, ever-changing journey. They were the last, precious threads of certainty she clung to, even as the vast, unknown western horizon relentlessly drew closer, holding both her greatest hope and an unspoken, chilling uncertainty. And then, the journey ended. The colossal engine, which had been her constant companion for so many endless days and nights, finally exhaled its last cloud of steam, a soft, almost chilling hiss that seemed to evaporate into the vast, indifferent air. Alara stepped down onto the wooden platform, the crunch of dry dust beneath her worn boots feeling strangely loud in the sudden quiet. This was it. This was the place where her future began. Her heart, which had been a drum of anticipation throughout the entire journey, now hammered with nervous excitement. Her eyes, still sparkling with the light of unshaken hope, swept across the small, sun-baked platform. They searched, eager and impatient, for a familiar face. For William. She searched among the few dusty travelers who disembarked, among the shadows cast by the station house, her gaze darting from one figure to another. A nervous flutter began in her stomach, a faint, unfamiliar chill. But there was no familiar wave, no joyful shout, no strong hand reaching out for hers. Just an empty space. A silent, unsettling absence that seemed to mock the fervent hopes she had carried across a continent. The bustling energy of the train, which had provided such a comforting backdrop, now retreated. The train itself, a colossal black beast, began to sigh and groan, preparing for its next departure. A mournful whistle, long and drawn out, tore through the stillness, a sound that resonated deep within Alara's soul, like a premonition. Days turned into agonizing hours. Hours stretched into an eternity. Alara waited. She waited beneath the relentless glare of the western sun, and then beneath the vast, indifferent blanket of stars. Each sunrise brought a fresh surge of desperate hope, quickly followed by the crushing weight of disappointment. She clung to her small trunk, her only remaining link to the life she had left behind, now a solitary sentinel on the desolate platform. She asked the few weary travelers, the grizzled station master, her voice growing fainter with each passing day. William Thatcher. He was to meet me, hey? Mr. Abernethy, his face etched with the silent understanding of a world that often dealt harsh blows, consulted his worn ledger, then shook his head, a gesture that severed the last fragile thread of her expectation. No one by that name listed for pickup. No telegram, either. Are you sure this is the right station? His words, kind though they were, landed like stones in the quiet cemetery of her dreams. And then, the truth arrived, not with a shout, but with a silence that screamed louder than any anguish. As the train's final, mournful whistle faded into the immense, indifferent west, carrying away the last vestiges of her connection to the east, Alara was left utterly, undeniably alone. Abandoned. The very air around her seemed to vibrate with the emptiness of a broken promise. The world, which only days ago had been filled with vibrant, unyielding promise, now felt hollow, cold, and cruelly silent. Every dream she had dared to harbor, every hope she had carefully nurtured, every single promise William had ever made, shattered. They lay broken and scattered on that dusty platform, no more substantial than the dry leaves caught in the wind. She was just gone, a bride left at the station, with nothing but the endless, unforgiving horizon stretching before her. The sun, a merciless orb of fire, rose again the next morning, but its light offered no comfort to Alara, only the stark, undeniable reality of her plight. Sleep had offered little solace, haunted by shattered dreams and the echo of a forgotten train whistle. She remained on that desolate platform, a solitary figure against an indifferent sky, huddled against the biting, dust-laden wind that whispered of abandonment. Her hope, once so vibrant, had been replaced by a soul-deep exhaustion, a despair that seeped into her very bones. The few townsfolk who passed by on their morning errands would cast quick, judgmental glances, their whispers like sharp, cutting stones. The abandoned bride, they'd murmur, a label that felt like a brand, searing itself into her raw spirit. Alara flinched with each passing glance, each whispered word, but she said nothing. What could she say? Her throat was choked with unshed tears, her spirit too broken to defend itself. She was adrift, a fragile leaf swept into a vast, unforgiving current, with no money, no connections, and nowhere to go. Her world had shrunk to this small, dusty square of ground. In the heart of that unforgiving landscape, a few miles from the small town, lived Caleb, a man carved from the same hard earth as the land he sought to tame. He was 28, but his eyes carried the weight of years beyond his age, etched by burdens he rarely spoke of. He was a man of few words, his presence a quiet force, his gaze often distant, holding a landscape of loss that few could comprehend. He rode into town that day, as he always did, for supplies, his thoughts consumed by the relentless struggle of his isolated ranch. But the whispers of the townsfolk, carried on the dry wind, caught his ear. "The abandoned bride," they murmured, "left at the station." He cast a glance towards the desolate platform, and in that fleeting moment, amidst the judgment and the gossip, Caleb saw something else. Not a burden, not a curiosity, but a reflection of a profound, raw pain. A solitude he knew intimately, a desperate fragility he had once felt himself. He understood the chilling void of being utterly, inexplicably alone. And in that silent recognition, something shifted within him. As dusk settled, cloaking the stark reality of the day in a compassionate dimness, Caleb approached. He dismounted, his boots kicking up small puffs of dust, a sound that seemed loud in the pervasive quiet. He didn't speak immediately. He just stood there, observing her, a silent sentinel against the fading light. His eyes, though deeply weary, seemed honest, devoid of the judgment she had grown accustomed to. Elara, huddled on her trunk, barely registered his presence at first, lost in the abyss of her despair. Then his voice, rough from disuse, yet surprisingly gentle, broke the silence. "You got nowhere else to go?" he asked. A simple question, but it cut through the haze of her grief. Elara looked up, startled, then desperate. No. No one." Caleb didn't offer pity. He offered a choice, a way forward. "Got a small ranch," he continued, his gaze steady, gesturing vaguely towards his horse. "Needs tending. Can pay you in a roof and food. Until you figure things out." Elara looked at him, her gaze searching his eyes for any hint of deceit. She found none. Only a quiet, undeniable honesty. "Why?" she managed to whisper, the word raw with disbelief. Caleb paused, his gaze drifting over the desolate station, then back to her. "Happened to me once," he finally said, his voice softer, etched with distant pain. "Left with nothing. Ain't no good feeling." He extended his hand, a simple, firm offer of help. Elara hesitated for a long moment, the weight of her desperation clashing with a lifetime of polite caution. Then, a silent decision made, she placed her hand in his. His grip was strong, reassuring. She glanced back at her trunk, abandoned on the empty platform, a silent testament to the dreams that had shattered there. "Leave it," Caleb said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "I'll get it later." And with that, she rose, leaving her past behind, walking towards an unknown future. They rode for what felt like an eternity, the only sounds the rhythmic plod of the horse and the whisper of the wind. Caleb's ranch was a testament to his own hard-won survival. It was small, rustic, and clearly struggling against the relentless elements. A simple wooden cabin, a worn barn leaning precariously, a few scraggly corrals, all isolated, nestled amidst a vast, unforgiving expanse of land that stretched to the very edge of the sky. It was a place of quiet endurance, mirroring its owner. He dismounted, leading her to the cabin, a humble structure of rough-hewn logs. Inside, it was sparse but surprisingly clean, offering the bare necessities, a single cot, a sturdy table, a stone hearth. "You can sleep here," he told her, his voice devoid of unnecessary ceremony. "I'll be in the barn." He handed her a tin plate of simple, hearty stew, its warmth a surprising comfort against the chill of her despair. Elara ate slowly, each bite a small victory against the gnawing emptiness she felt. Tears, unbidden, welled in her eyes, tears of exhaustion, of lingering fear, but also, surprisingly, of a strange, profound relief. Caleb watched her from the doorway for a moment, a silent, watchful presence, then quietly slipped away, leaving her to the fragile peace of her new, uncertain sanctuary. In the quiet evenings that followed, as the fire crackled a gentle song in the stone hearth, a fragile honesty began to slowly fill the space between Alara and Caleb. It wasn't spoken aloud at first, but rather built through shared glances, the comfortable rhythm of shared chores, and the simple act of existing together in that remote cabin. Alara, still haunted by the crushing weight of her abandonment, found herself drawn to the silent burden she sensed in Caleb. One evening, as she mended a tear in his worn shirt, her courage found its voice. She dared to ask about his own shadows, about the unspoken sorrow that often clouded his eyes. Caleb, a man carved from silence, did not offer grand confessions. He spoke little of his past, but his words, few as they were, carried the immense weight of profound loss. He spoke of a life that had once been vibrant, of laughter that had once filled these very walls, now only echoes. He spoke of dreams that had withered under a relentless sun, of a loneliness that had become a constant companion. He understood, in a way no one else could, the gnawing emptiness that Alara carried, the relentless questions of what might have been that tormented her nights. He shared his quiet wisdom, that one learns to live with the empty spaces, not by forgetting, but by learning to fill them with something else, with purpose, with resilience. Slight pause, and in that shared vulnerability, amidst the comforting flicker of the firelight, their connection deepened. It was a bond forged not in romantic words, but in the quiet recognition of shared scars, a mutual understanding of what it meant to endure. The land itself, vast and beautiful yet cruelly indifferent, mirrored their internal struggles. A relentless, unforgiving drought tightened its bony grip on the already parched earth, threatening to swallow Caleb's small ranch whole. Every single day became a desperate battle against the parched soil, against the searing sun, against the insidious creep of fading hope. The well, once a reliable source of life, yielded only meager trickles, each drop a precious commodity. The few crops they had managed to plant withered before their eyes, turning brittle and brown. They fought side by side, Alara and Caleb, their hands becoming calloused, their bodies aching with the exhaustion of ceaseless labor. They hauled water, dug deeper, prayed for rain that never came. Their spirits were tested, stretched thin by the relentless pressure. Yet, in the face of this harsh, existential reality, Alara's resilience shone brighter than the relentless sun. She offered not just her tireless labor, but a quiet, unwavering strength. A simple, comforting gesture, a shared glance, a hand briefly touching Caleb's arm as he struggled with a stubborn pump, became a powerful, unspoken promise of solidarity. Slight pause. She was no longer simply the abandoned bride. She was a fighter, a partner in this brutal dance with the land. And in that shared fight, in the quiet depths of shared struggle, Caleb began to see her not just as a survivor he'd rescued, but as an indispensable force, a true companion whose quiet presence made the burden, somehow, lighter. As the weeks turned into months, a quiet, almost imperceptible shift occurred between them. The initial awkwardness of strangers had long faded, replaced by the deep familiarity of two souls who had built a foundation of trust on the bedrock of shared hardship. They moved through their days in a silent choreography, each knowing the other's next step, anticipating needs without a word. Alara found a profound sense of purpose in the endless work of the ranch, a stark contrast to the aimless despair she had felt on the station platform. She was no longer waiting. She was building. And Caleb, in time, found a quiet joy in her presence, a warmth that slowly, carefully, began to thaw the frozen landscape of his own grief. Their conversations remained sparse, But each spoken word, each knowing glance, carried a weight of understanding that surpassed eloquent speeches. He saw her resilience, her unwavering spirit. She saw his quiet strength, his hidden kindness. They found solace in the simple routines, the communal meals, the shared silence of the vast starlit nights, the gentle rhythm of their breathing in the quiet cabin. It was a fragile peace, yes, vulnerable to the whims of the land and the echoes of their pasts. But for Alara, after the shattering storm of abandonment, it was everything. A seed of true connection had taken root, deep in the dust of the Old West, promising a new kind of future she had never dared to imagine. Just as a fragile peace began to settle over the ranch, just as the delicate roots of a new life had truly begun to take hold, the past rode back into their lives. On the dusty road, a familiar figure appeared, a dark silhouette against the relentless glare of the morning sun. A lone rider, Alara, hanging laundry by the cabin, paused, her movement stilling. She squinted, her hand unconsciously rising to shield her eyes, trying to make sense of the approaching shape. As the rider drew closer, her breath caught in her throat. Her heart, which had known a quiet, steady rhythm for months, suddenly lurched, a frantic drum against her ribs. It was William. He was alive. He was he, the man who had abandoned her, the ghost of her shattered past, had returned. He dismounted quickly, his movements eager, almost frantic, despite the dust of travel clinging to his good Eastern clothes. He rushed towards Alara, his arms outstretched, a desperate, apologetic plea already forming on his lips. "Alara, my love, you're alive. I found you." But Alara, rooted to the spot, stepped back, her face a mask of shock and a dawning, terrible realization. The simple act of stepping back, of refusing his embrace, spoke volumes. It was not the reunion he had imagined. Just then, Caleb emerged from the barn, an axe still clutched in his hand, his eyes immediately assessing the scene. His gaze hardened instantly upon seeing William, recognizing the intruder in their hard-won peace. The air thickened with unspoken tension, a silent accusation hanging heavy between the two men, separated by the woman caught tragically in the middle. William's return forced Alara into a crucible. He spun a tale of robbery, of being left for dead, of months spent recovering and searching for her. His words poured out, a desperate torrent of explanations, pleas for forgiveness, and promises of the life they were still meant to have. The grand life, the secure future. But as he spoke, Alara heard the subtle cracks in his narrative, a dissonance in his desperate pleas. She saw the lack of true remorse, the horrid excuses that didn't quite cover the truth. The dreams that once shimmered had shattered on that desolate platform months ago, replaced by a harsh, tangible reality she had built with her own two hands. Caleb, the silent observer, stood nearby, his gaze unwavering, taking in every word, every nuance. He knew the true cost of abandonment. He knew the empty space William had left. The cabin became a battleground, not with fists, but with words, with accusations, with the immense weight of a shattered promise and a newly found, fragile trust. Alara, caught between the ghost of her past and the undeniable, living reality of her present, found her heart torn. Every fiber of her being urged her to cling to the safe, familiar dream, but her hardened spirit, forged in the fires of the West, yearned for the honest, quiet reality she had built. Her eyes sought Caleb's, a silent plea for strength, for guidance. And in his steady, unwavering gaze, a gaze that held no judgment, only understanding and steadfast presence, she found her answer. This isolated ranch, this demanding life, this quiet man, this was real, and it was hers. The decision weighed heavily, a crossroads between a broken past and an uncertain but honest future. Alara turned, her resolve clear. She chose the hard-earned reality over the glittering, hollow dream. She chose the man who had seen her at her lowest, who had given her not pity, but purpose. William, consumed by rage and disbelief, mounted his horse. His final bitter words were lost to the wind as he rode away, consumed by the dust he raised. As the last traces of him vanished from the horizon, a profound peace settled over the ranch, a quiet truth emerging. Ilara was no longer the abandoned bride. She was the woman who stayed, the woman who chose. And in the vast, unforgiving expanse of the Old West, she found not a tragedy, but the true beginning of her life.